as I look, nobody traveled between November and February. Nobody traveled then. And this is getting on towards the end of October, maybe even into November when this day comes. So what happens when people don't listen to our wisdom, don't take our advice? Let them fly by the seat of their pants. Yeah?
Like you were saying earlier about we're all kids.
That's right.
When we try to tell a kid something and they know it all,
They do.
and they, it doesn't matter how many times you've done it before, you know this and you know what's going on. They know
Yes,
better than
they
you
know
do.
better. Yes, we. And I can see many times when I did that, and I still come many days now. I think, well, now my mama tried to tell me that, you know, and I just didn't listen. Somehow we just didn't listen. But you know, God always knows what's best, and He's always the one that's going to take care of us and see that it's okay. We're not going to read Acts 27:13 through 20, but I liked what in verse 13 it said, a gentle south wind blew softly. Sometimes when we're listening to folks, we tend to listen to those that are gently and better spoken than we do to the thing that we know is right. And that's what happened here. Here comes this nice soft wind, and so all these, quote, know-it-alls get on their little ship and make everybody get on there with them and take off because, look, the weather's beautiful. But it didn't stay beautiful. Okay? The wind started blowing harder and harder and harder. And down in verse 20, it says, all hope was fading. What is it like when hope fades?
Giving up.
You giving up? It's painful. It is. It is scary. It's painful. It's scary.
Reckon how many times we sort of lose our trust
Yes.
when things got it just about figured out, and then boom, something hits you that.
That's right.
Listen after all.
That's right. And that word was fading. I know that I let that happen. You know, you get busy. Mark was talking about that this morning. You get busy and you start running around like a chicken with your head chopped off, and you forget to sit down and do your quiet time. Or maybe you do it, but you worry, you looking at the clock wondering, you know, do I need to get up yet? Can I finish this or not? You know, you're sitting there, you're worrying. And that's when our hope starts to fade. It isn't, you know, but it's the tense of the verb. When something is fading, it hadn't completely happened yet. It's in the process of happening. So, you know, we go through a process, and it's our job to keep ourselves on the end where it hasn't begun to fade yet. And so we do that by taking spiritual food. Look at verse 21 there in Acts 27. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul stood up among them and said, you men should have followed my advice not to sail from Crete and sustain this damaging loss. Now, when I read that, first thing I do is I get that attitude like I just used in my voice, okay? But if you go on and read down there, Paul didn't say it like that, not like I did. And so he said, you should have followed my advice so you wouldn't have been hurt. I'm just trying to help you, okay? Now, I urge you to take courage because there will be no loss of life, but only of the ship. For last night an angel of the God I belong to and serve stood by me and said, don't be afraid, Paul. It is necessary for you to appear before Caesar, and indeed God has graciously given you all those who are sailing with you. So take courage, men, because I believe God that it will be just the way it was told to me. But we have to run aground on some island. Many times in the Bible, God shares His word with us by letting somebody record it, like Moses or Luke or Mark or whoever. But Luke is actually here on the boat with Paul. I did not know that. Did y'all know that? Luke was on there. So if God had not saved the lives of the people on that boat, we wouldn't have had those two books in our Bible. But God was always planning ahead. because he's omnipresent. When Brandon, I don't remember his last name, last week, said that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and all-knowing. I don't get that one out. But the three omnis, he's all of everything. And he is, and since he's all present, there's no past, present, and future for him. He's there in all those times at the same time. And I know that's something to wrap our heads around. It's hard to, but he is. And this is a terrible situation. What do you think these passengers were? What was their mental, emotional, and physical state at this point in time?
Scared and upset. A nervous wreck.
Yeah? Do you think they're going to listen this time? Maybe, and they do. They do listen to Paul this time. But, it wasn't because of anything Paul did. It was by God's grace.
Yes.
And because God was there, and they had to listen to them, and Paul offered them hope. All right, what is hope? Future?
Hopefully something's gonna come up later.
Anticipation.
Yeah, it is. It's anticipation of something good that's going to happen, a belief that it's going to be okay.
Jesus is hope.
Jesus is hope, yes. Paul insists that all of them are going to make it through the storm because of the promises of God, because of his providence, okay? He gave them hope. He did. The Holman Bible Dictionary defines hope as trustful expectation, particularly with reference to the fulfillment of God's promises. Biblical hope is the anticipation of a favorable outcome under God's guidance. Hope is the confidence that what God has done for us in the past guarantees our participation in what God will do in our future. And then in Titus, Hebrews, and John, it says, in hope of eternal life, which God cannot lie, promised before the world began. I have the wrong papers why I couldn't find 2 Corinthians. Your paper has 2 Corinthians on it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well, my paper doesn't, so I'll just go with that. Are you going to give me your paper? Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, hope in Hebrews 6:9, we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which entered into that within the veil. So in other words, even there he's saying we can go to the Holy of Holies and get that hope. All right, so we have hope from God because we know God's character and his promises. And it asked me to invite you guys, if you did your promise journal last week, if you wanted to share any. Does anybody have anything from there that they wrote down, a promise of God that they came across last week?
No, we've asked you if we didn't do what we're supposed to.
Okay, that's fine. I didn't do it a lot.
We're children of this.
Oh, that's okay.
You saying that, but
Oh, it's okay. All right, but I wrote 3 out of Proverbs, okay? And I'm going to share Proverbs 18, 19, and 20 for you. Just part of each verse, okay? Proverbs 28:18 says, whoever walks blamelessly will be saved. And I can't walk blamelessly, but it's like perfect in the New Testament. It's a word it's not saying that I didn't mess up. It's just saying that I let God carry me through the mess ups, okay? And then in Proverbs 28:19, it says, he who tills his land will have plenty. Hey, I need to work, in other words, right? And then in verse 20, it says, a faithful man will abound with blessings. So as long as we're there with the Lord, But also, I'm sorry, but I am going to go to 2 Thessalonians because it says those who trouble and persecute us as Christians will be punished. And we will be glorified when God comes. So there's promises of all different kinds there that give us hope because we know God's character. We know God's character and that he doesn't lie. Okay? Luke was a skilled writer. And remember I asked you, why was he doing all that? And our writer of our Sunday school book says that he was making it more dramatic. As much as I don't want to, I tend to listen to the most dramatic kids the most. They demand our attention, don't they?
Squeaky wheel gets
Yeah, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. And you know, it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't always be that way, but it usually ends up. But Dr. Luke was not writing just a made-up story. He was recording what actually happened to him and how Paul's faith, one man's faith, made that big of a difference for all those people on that ship. And if you go ahead and keep reading through Acts 27 and 28, it'll tell you how many people's lives it saved on the ship, not to mention those where he lands. So, do you ever make an excuse for not helping? Our writer asked. Yeah. He wanted me to show you a video, and I looked at it and I said, I don't know even how to get it there to look for, but it shows 4 high school students that helped this elderly man. Just because they see him, they just stop to help. How many high school students do you think had already seen him and not done anything? Yeah, there's no talents, that's right. Not to mention the adults that went by and knew he needed help. But it says that we should be honest with ourselves. It says, dare you guys. I need to give you a dare. To be honest with yourself about if you've seen somebody struggling, what would you have done? Would you let the barriers of age, race, stop you from doing a good deed? Would you be afraid to hold someone's hand or stand behind them to keep them from falling if they were stinky and nasty? You know, it's about compassion. It's about caring for others. And you know, our writer says there's always a mental justification for not helping. Most people, and even many Christians, use the excuses of not having enough time or money or emotional bandwidth to help others in need. I found myself guilty of that this week but I should have read this part of my lesson before that happened, and I might not have used that. I just felt like I didn't have enough emotional bandwidth to pick up one more thing or carry some of somebody else's load, one more thing of somebody else's load, but I should have, okay? Because Jesus reminds us that we're called to help others even when we are dealing with our own adversity. You know, Paul had a lot of adversity here. Had a lot of people that were against him. Even the weather was against him. But they chose not to listen, so he gets shipwrecked on this island of Malta. And that's where the next scripture comes to. And I'll go back to the Proverbs and Jeremiah in just a minute. But I'm going to go on to Acts 28, verses 7 through 10. Because this is where they do get saved. They do run aground. Paul told them they had to run aground. They did eat some bread. They didn't listen to him. They ate some bread. They threw the other overboard. Some of the soldiers want to kill the prisoners. That gets stopped. They even take the rescue boat, they call it a skiff, and they get rid of it because some of the sailors are trying to save themselves and leave everybody else on the boat, okay? So they landed on this island of Malta, and there's these local people that are so nice and so serving, even though some Bible translations call them barbarians. But the word that they use in the original Greek just means that they didn't speak Greek. And, you know, they thought that people that didn't speak Greek were not civilized, were not educated, okay? But yet these uneducated people were willing to help them. They built them a fire. They tried to take care of them. And they even, in the part that we're skipping there in chapter 27, Paul picks up some wood and gets bit by a viper, a snake, and he just shakes it off. And the people there, these barbarians, are waiting for Paul to die. Because they think, see, he's a Roman prisoner. He must be some awful person, a murderer. And the snake didn't kill him, but this snake's going to. Just serves him right. But they still didn't stop serving. That's amazing. So, we can, you know, Paul, it says that it doesn't say that Paul corrected them. but it infers that Paul did not let that rumor hold. And so now in Acts 28, verse 7, they're taking him to the estate of the leading man on the island, who was named Publius, who welcomed us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. And there was my proof that Luke was there on the ship with him. Okay? And again, there's the 3. But this dude's father, Publius's father, was in bed suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went to him and praying, laid his hands on him and healed him. Because in this point in time, you didn't heal from those kind of that sickness very often, okay? He laid his hands on him, he healed him, and after this, the rest of those on the island who had diseases came and were healed, so that they heaped many honors on us, and when we sailed, they gave us what we needed. In Paul's most difficult times, he still took time to heal the sick and to help others. So that's what we're supposed to do. Our writer says, this is his quote, even during trials, believers should take time to serve others. And we know that's true. There's that should again, that we know that's true, but it's not easy to do. And these people that weren't, quote, Christians, weren't even Greek-speaking, they were supposedly barbarians, they knew what justice was. Do we know what justice is? I don't. I just keep telling my grandchildren and other people that'll listen that I don't want justice. I want mercy, because I mess up so much. I don't need that justice thing. I want mercy. But it is part of our job to dispense justice as best we can to others. And it gives us that in the Key Doctrine 94. I don't know that the number makes any difference, but it's at the bottom of page 82 of your book. And it says, all Christians are under obligation to seek to make the will of Christ supreme in our own lives and in human society. Means and methods used for the improvement of society and the establishment of righteousness among men can be totally and permanently helpful only when they are rooted in the regeneration of the individual by the saving grace of God and Jesus Christ. And I'm going to skip down some to every Christian should seek to bring industry, government, and society as a whole under the sway of the principles of righteousness, truth, and brotherly love. In order to promote these ends, we should be ready to work with all men of goodwill in any good cause, but always being careful to act in the spirit of love without compromising their loyalty to Christ and His truth. That's a big mouthful. Being willing to work to save those, to save everybody. It's about work and about being willing to save everybody.
If we're trying to give others justice, aren't we judging them?
We are.
And we're not supposed to judge?
No, we're not supposed to judge. But we are supposed to be there presenting what Christ is like.
Yeah.
And doing our best to model what He's like and serving others. Yes.
You got to set the example.
You do. You have to set the example. Yes. One of the parts I said, Skip said that we should always oppose racism, greed, selfishness, vice, in any kind of immorality. We should provide for the orphan, the needy, and the abused, the aged, the helpless, and the sick. And we should speak on behalf of the unborn and
Amen.
contend for the sanctity of all human life, from conception to natural death. Even now, that's in what is natural death is a question a lot of people out in society ask, and it's just really scary. It's when God chooses for us to leave and for us to choose to come into being. But had you ever thought about Proverbs 18:21 right there? Look back if you don't mind, and then we may go on through Ephesians in a minute. But it says, even in adversity, God's people offer hope to others. Proverbs 18:21. I know I've read Proverbs over and over. I've even written Proverbs out before and used it for some school stuff because I had to write it out, so I didn't read it out of a Bible. But it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. Woo! And they that love it shall eat the fruit of thereof. So if you love talking, okay. But yeah. But death and life are in the power of the tongue.
It's something you say to somebody can do worse than stabbing you.
That's right. Because chances are, you've got, I don't know, I've heard a number. You've got millions of places you can stab a person and them survive. But there's only like 20 some places that you can stab a person that they won't survive. Okay? So chances of somebody healing from a stab are like 1,000,000 to 1. Okay, or greater. But when you say a word that discourages others, there's no way to heal that.
Hurt for a lifetime.
Hurt for a lifetime. You know, and that really disturbed me. And I spent a lot of time this week crying and praying over some of my words that I spewed out. Okay, and I wanted to, I took a picture of these, okay, because I wanted to read this to you. The Bible tells us that the power of life and death is in our tongue. Therefore, we need to be deliberate when we speak about or over other people, ensuring that our words are constructive and life-giving. Not everyone has been so privileged to have blessings spoken over their life, especially as a child. We all too often hear parents, teachers, children, even pastors speak appallingly ungodly words over others. These negative words can pierce the heart in an unending wound, or with an unending wound. You know, that's so scary. That is so scary. Because you know, nothing in the Bible is written in there. And what if something that I said caused maybe not a physical death, but a spiritual death? Or our writer drew it back into the idea of hope. We may be, with every negative word we give that person, and now it's not saying don't correct them, but it's like the difference between the way I first read when Paul said, I told you so, and then saying, I told you this because I want to help you. There's a lot of difference in the way that's said, you know? That's the power of that tongue, okay? And those people, when we speak to them, they're going to have to eat the fruit from our tongue, not just from their own tongue. And to me, that is just so scary. But the hope we have is in Christ. Because remember the definition that they gave us for hope? It was that the anticipation of a favorable outcome under God's guidance. It's only with God that we have hope of a favorable outcome. And it's only with Him and our guarantee of what He's like that we can give hope to others. Okay? Thoughts or comments?
We just need to have, hope. If you don't have hope, you don't have an aim for anything.
That's right.
You just sort of sound like something sedentary.
Yes. Yeah. It moves us forwards. And when hope is fading, then we're getting slower and slower and slower in our forward movement towards Christ, towards being like Christ.
Like I was saying, 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
That's right. Yep. Yeah. But the people on that island that they considered uncivilized, they even had a clear sense of right and wrong. That's why they expected Paul to die from that snake bite. Was because he must have done something wrong or he wouldn't have been a prisoner of the Romans. But Paul had absolute faith in God's repeated promises that he would see Rome. He knew he would not die on Malta. And so God used this miracle to authenticate his message and his messenger. Have you heard the people talk about intentional acts of kindness? And some people have even, go online and show how every day they do an intentional act of kindness. We don't have to get online to show it, but we should always be looking for a way to be kind. It's easier said than done, especially on the days when we're having a hard time. On the days we're having a hard time.
We should do it, but we shouldn't have to worry about broadcasting. it.
That's right. And we shouldn't have to worry about the outcome.
Yeah.
Because
We
it's
do it
not-
Because God wants us to.
That's
not
right.
Because we want that credit
That's
for
right.
doing it.
That's right. Jesus never worried about what the outcome was.
Yeah.
He did what he was supposed to do. Okay. But it gave some illustrations of like, and I never done this, and it probably wouldn't do any good now, but it says sticking a $5 under the pump of a gas handle, leaving that for the next person. No?
I never-
Me either. No, yeah, it's okay. And what was some of the others that it says? Oh, the one about where you pay for somebody's food that's behind you. Yeah,
I've
Yeah.
had it done to me.
yeah. And pass on and on. Okay, but you know, it doesn't have to be that obvious. It doesn't have to be even something that somebody else knows, because then somebody else is going to know that if you left them that. But it's just by. And for me, it's sometimes just not saying what I think. You know, just don't say it. Just let it go, you know?
That's the hardest thing for me to do is let it go.
Yes.
Well, me too.
Because if it comes up in my mind, it comes out.
Yeah.
But if you're gonna do something to somebody, you do it and you tell the person you're doing it to, giving it to say, I do not want you to repeat this.
Yes.
You don't want the person to know who you, that gave it to them, just let them wonder.
Right. Yes.
Somebody would do that for them.
Right. And that's the way it is that we should be going around without advertising and without people knowing. It says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. You know, but there's other things that we really never think of. Now, but my mama did teach me this one. Don't ever let food go to waste. Find somebody that will take it, you know, something like that, you know. Or take an extra case of water, it says, and hand out to kids in the park. If you see kids out there playing, go get them a bottle of water. But you don't have, or you can just leave. You know, wouldn't it be neat if a cooler was just out there for kids on hot days, you know? Or we know about clothing and all those things. But the one thing that we may not think about, it says to challenge us to use this as a faith-building exercise for our entire family, is to pray for anybody that might be blessed by your service during the upcoming week. During the upcoming week. Seek to develop relationships that will flourish, and as you find new opportunities for service, trust that the Lord will use those for His glory. Because Jesus humbled Himself on our behalf to bring about our salvation, we live with greater concern for other salvation than for our own situation. That's what our writer wrote, that we do live with greater. I thought, well, we should, yes, but I don't know that I do. But he was being hopeful and saying that we will live, and we do live like that, for Christ, because that's the way He lived for us. Oh, how do we live with hope during difficult times, and how do we share that hope with others?
Through the grace of God.
Yes, the grace of God.
You have to know Him to be able to live through those times.
That's true. And you have to be in contact with Him and have a relationship with Him, or every relationship you have is going to fall completely apart. It is. And that's where I was going when I typed on way back in the middle of the front side of your paper. In Jeremiah 29:13, it says, and ye shall seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart. And then we can have His hope if we search for Him with all our heart and let Him take care of everything that we need and know. Ricky, will you lead us in our closing prayer?
Lord, I want to thank you for letting us have this time.